Welcome to Derby Music Academy. This is lesson number 1 for beginners in our series of How to Read Music. Music notes are written on 5 lines. You can see them clearly marked from the bottom upwards and in 4 spaces. The lines and spaces are called a stave or a staff. When we learn to read music, it is a good idea to use 2 staves, and the reason will become clear in a moment. There are 5 lines and 4 spaces on the top stave and exactly the same on the bottom stave. Together, the 2 staves are called a grand staff. There are 2 interesting signs at the beginning of each of the lines of the staff. This sign is called a treble clef. A treble clef is put on a stave when one is reading high notes. So, if you were a singer and you had a high voice, your music would be written with a treble clef at the beginning of your stave. High notes on a piano are written with a treble clef at the beginning of the stave, and high-sounding instruments such as violins, flutes, piccolos will have a treble clef at the beginning of the stave. In early music, many years ago, the treble clef was shaped just a little bit like the letter G. It was called the G clef. The G clef was written on the second line from the bottom of the stave. And when you started to write that letter, you would actually start writing it. You would put your pen or your calligraphy pen on the second line from the bottom of the stave. And this line is, of course, the G line. The G clef evolved into the treble clef as we know it today. And if you were writing a treble clef on a stave, you would still put your pen on the second line from the bottom of the stave on the G line. Any note that is written on the G line where there is a treble clef on the stave will be called G. Those notes are G. And now let us move on to where we are going to be looking again at the grand staff. The sign on the lower stave is called a bass clef. A bass clef is used to read low notes. So people with low voices will read music where they have a bass clef written on the stave. Lower notes on the piano from middle C downwards are written in the bass clef, and low-sounding instruments such as a cello or a double bass will play music that is written with a bass clef. In early music, the bass clef was shaped a little bit like the letter F, and it was called an F clef. This clef evolved into the bass clef that we know today. Its curl, if you start to write it, still starts on the F line, which is the 4th line up from the bottom on the second stave. Any notes written after the bass clef sign on the second stave, if they appear on that 4th line from the bottom, will be known as an F. This concludes lesson number 1. For more information, please visit www.derbymusicacademy.co.uk.